I had to leave some holes where an old decaying stump was buried, and you would be better off getting those." His family is completely shocked and stunned by what they saw inside Otto Kilcher's closed-root basement. Less than 72 hours have passed since the discovery. The backlash is already threatening to destroy everything the Kilchers have worked so hard to achieve over the years. They believed they knew Alaska, but this is not it. A damaged hinge and an inquisitive adolescent led to the finding. August Kilcher's youngest son had been investigating the homestead's outside limits when he spotted something strange next to the ancient root cellar that his grandfather Otto had kept shut for many years. The hefty wooden door hung slightly jarred, worn by innumerable Alaskan winters. The padlock that had traditionally held it in place was broken and rusted in the ground. All his life, August had heard tales of the root merchant. Otto consistently dismissed inquiries about it with evasive responses and firm exhortations to avoid it. His restrictions were observed by the family. Otto Kilcher was, after all, a man who respected his solitude, a pioneer who has forged a living in one of the harshest environments on the planet for more than 70 years. However, curiosity is a strong force, particularly for a young guy who grew up seeing the successes and setbacks of his family unfold on national television. August pushed the door open wider. The hinges protested with a moan. He hesitated as cold air shot out of the shadows below, bearing a stench. Something more, something chemical and unnerving, mingled with damp earth. His father was called for. No answer. It was a calm afternoon at the homestead. The majority of the family had gone to Homer to get supplies. August was by himself. Carefully he made his way down the wooden steps, penetrating the darkness with the illumination on his phone. The beam passed across stone walls that were adorned with mostly empty antique shelves. However, dozens of sealed containers, plastic bins, metal crates, and glass jars with handwritten labels that had faded with time were stacked against the wall in the far corner. August walked slowly toward him, his heart pounding in his chest. There was something unsettling about this location and the long-standing obscurity surrounding it. He opened the first container while on his knees. His blood chilled at what he saw within. Hundreds of photos. Some were printed on contemporary photo paper and were quite recent. Others were decades old, with curled and yellowed edges. It was more than just homestead memories and family pictures, though. August saw pictures of people he didn't know. He discovered the journals after seeing surveillance-style photos taken from a distance and notes written in Otto's distinctive handwriting on the backs that included dates, times, and locations. Otto's careful handwriting is included in 3 leather-bound journals. August was unable to fully understand the image that was portrayed by the observations, calculations, and records that filled page after page. As he flipped through them, his hands trembled, and his mind raced to process what he was seeing. He reached for his phone and called his dad. He didn't wait for a response this time. He left a voicemail that would alter everything. "You have to get home now, Dad. Grandpa's root cellar is where I am. What's down here will astound you." The homestead's secrets. Since its establishment in the 1940s by Ewell and Ruth Kilcher, the Kilcher homestead has stood as a testament to tenacity and self-reliance. On Alaska, the last frontier, their kids, ATS, Otto, and the others, grew up exhibiting the principles of independence that would eventually enthrall millions of spectators. However, underlying the endearing story of survival and family harmony, there had always been hints of strife and strain that the cameras were unable to record. Otto Kilcher, who is currently in his early 70s, has always been the mechanic, the problem solver, and the practical one. Otto was more interested in the material world, machinery, buildings, and solutions than his brother Ats, who studied music and adopted a more philosophical outlook on life. He was the man who could mend anything with wire and perseverance, and he was the foundation of the homestead's infrastructure. However, family members had observed behavioral changes in Otto during the previous 18 months. He grew more reclusive, spending extended periods of time by himself in his studio or going missing for whole afternoons without giving a reason. In private talks, his wife Charlotte shared her worries with other family members. This was distinct from Otto's usual independence. He appeared distracted, even suspicious. Otto's son Shane Kilcher remembered a conversation he had with his father last summer, during which he explicitly questioned him about the root cellar. Shane subsequently informed his cousins, "I just wanted to know what was down there. He gave me a look as if I had crossed some unseen boundary. He told me to respect his personal space and that it was just storage. He didn't sound like himself when he said it. It was nearly menacing." The root cellar was constructed in the 1960s when the family was still having trouble making ends meet. In Alaska, root vendors were crucial because they provided food storage throughout the harsh winters when fresh supplies were hard to come by. However, the majority of the Kilchers had given up their antiquated storing techniques as the decades went by and contemporary comforts became accessible. The car cellar ought to have been out of business, but he kept it up to date. He made 2 door replacements. He made it very clear that no one was allowed to enter without his consent and improved the lock 3 times. That border has been observed by the family. They each had their own lifestyles and areas of the homestead to oversee. They had become well known and financially secure as a result of the show, but the strain on family relationships had also increased. For the sake of family unity and their public image, everyone had learnt to give each other space in order to prevent needless confrontation. However, that delicate component was now broken with August's finding. Within an hour of getting his son's message, Ivan reached the homestead. He discovered August sitting outside the root cellar, clearly disturbed and pale. At a crime scene, the containers had been brought to the surface and arranged in a line with the grass-like evidence. At first, Ivan was upset with his son for violating Otto's privacy by going in without authorization. However, as soon as he saw the contents, his fury vanished. On murmured, "This doesn't make any sense," as he leafed through one of the notebooks. The photos were the most unsettling aspect. Why would Dad keep all of this? What was he doing? A few displayed places in the vicinity of Homer and the other towns. Others seemed to have been captured in Fairbanks, Anchorage, and even Seward. The subjects of the pictures were going about their daily lives, including going shopping, taking walks, and sitting in cars. However, they had been observed by someone. Their movements had been recorded by someone, and that person was an Otto Kilcher. The notebooks included thorough logs, and the times and dates corresponded with the photos. Observations, habits, and patterns mentioned in the notes indicated years or even decades of systematic surveillance. Nevertheless, there were no justifications or explanations to support any of this. Word had gotten throughout the household by evening. With a somber expression, Atz reached Otto's portion of the homestead. Charlotte was crying and insisted that an explanation was required. In astonished silence, the younger generation, An, Shane, Nikos, and the others, gathered to consider the implications for the man they believed to be familiar. Out of all the questions, one lingered. When faced with this revelation, where was Otto and what would he say? The contents were disclosed. The extent of Otto's covert operations grew more obvious and unsettling as the Kilcher family started a more in-depth investigation of the root cellar's belongings. What at first seemed to be haphazard spying turned into something far more planned and systematic. Each of the 37 containers had a label that indicated the year, which ranged from 1998 to the present. Each container contained handwritten notes, photographs, printed documents, and newspaper clippings that had all been meticulously cataloged by someone carrying out a thorough inquiry. While other family members watched, too stunned to fully participate, An and Shane took leadership of going through the materials. Their findings presented a complicated and unsettling picture. Photographs of a guy in his 40s were found in Container 1, which was stamped with the year 1998. The pictures showed him at the waterfront, the grocery store, a local tavern, and other places around Homer. A yellowed newspaper item about a fishing accident that killed 3 people that year was clipped to the pictures. According to Otto's records, he had been following this man for several months prior to the collision. Container 7 from 2004 described a woman and her teenage daughter, with the final note in that year's journal reading, "Confirmed, negligence proven, no official charges, justice incomplete." The surveillance images were more comprehensive, spanning multiple months. Copies of police reports and Child Protective Services records were among the documents that were attached. However, it was still unclear how Otto had gotten such private information. According to his notes, he had been keeping an eye on a domestic abuse case. The last child was taken from the house. Mom charged. Until it was forced to act, the system failed. One design after another appeared. Otto had been observing particular individuals involved in circumstances that, based on his careful notes, indicated instances of injustice or accountability. A landlord accused of predatory behavior, employers who had taken advantage of employees, and drunk drivers who had received light punishments. Every case was meticulously recorded. However, the surveillance itself wasn't the most unsettling feature, it was what looked to have transpired later. Otto's records recorded results that were too fortuitous to be disregarded in a number of instances. After a surprise inspection revealed significant safety infractions on his boat in 1998, the careless fisherman lost his commercial license 2 years later. Following the discovery of fresh evidence, the abusive mother from 2004 was charged with further crimes, evidence that Otto's notebooks indicate he had assisted in bringing to light by providing authorities with anonymous tips. Otto had been stepping in, not merely observing. Beneath the others, Shane discovered a different diary that seemed to be a master log. Over a 27-year period, 42 names were listed. A synopsis of the apparent injustice and the final result was provided for each name. A basic check was used to flag some entries. Others were marked with question marks. Some had no notes at all, indicating that Otto was still keeping an eye on certain cases or circumstances. He was acting like a vigilante, Ann added softly, his voice a mix of dread and incredulity. He was doing this all these years while we were constructing this property, producing the show, and teaching our children about family and values. However, there was more. According to the latest containers, Otto's actions had not ceased nor even slowed. Surveillance of a local businessman accused of environmental crimes was found in container 36 from just last year. Otto had gathered proof of unlawful dumping that seemed to go beyond what environmental officials had found, and he had chronicled the man's daily activities and those of his colleagues. Then, there was Container 37, the most active instance for the current year. Photographs of a man who had performed contract work on the property 3 years prior were found inside, and the family recognized him. The family had fond memories of him. He was engaged to assist with a large construction project, but due to a disagreement over salary, he unexpectedly left. Otto had refused to pay the stipulated amount, claiming the man's work was of poor quality. Despite threatening to take legal action, the contractor never did. Otto thought the contractor had been taking risky shortcuts by utilizing subpar materials, which could have led to structural collapses. Based on the diary entries, he had been keeping an eye on the man's later employment, recording other houses where he thought there might have been like carelessness. Less than a month has passed since the last pictures were taken. As her stepchildren described what they had discovered, Charlotte sat silently. She had a pale face. She eventually added, "I knew he was stressed about something, but I never imagined how he could hide this from all of us. How could he bear this weight for so long by himself?" The family was confronted with an impractical situation. Evidence of what can be seen as stalking, harassment, and possibly unlawful monitoring was in their hands. However, at least on the surface, the cases Otto had been recording seemed to entail real wrongs, instances when the justice system had failed or vulnerable people had been harmed. Was Otto acting illegally as a vigilante? Or was he a guy who, in his long life, had witnessed too much injustice and had made the decision to act when others would not? They were starting to realize that both might be the answer. the family's fear and Otto's quiet. Shortly after dusk, Otto Kilcher went back to the homestead. Unaware that his family had gathered at Evan's cabin, and that the secret he had kept for almost 30 years had been revealed, he drove his ancient pickup truck along the well-known dirt road. He was called by Ats. The exchange was short and tense. "Otto needs to be spoken to tonight. Everyone is present." Otto's answer was similarly truncated. "What is it about? What do you know?" The line was silent for a long time. Then Otto just responded, "I'll be there in 20 minutes," and hung up. To the family waiting inside, those 20 minutes seemed like hours. Since Ats was the oldest brother, they had agreed that he would take the lead in the discussion. However, everyone in attendance was aware that this encounter would be different from anything they had previously encountered as a group. There was no disagreement over territorial claims or animosity. This was the central question of Otto Kilcher's true identity. Otto appeared older than his years when he entered the room. His face was unreadable, neither defiant nor contrite. He looked around the room at the faces of his wife, nephews, nieces, brother, and kids. His posture changed as his gaze landed on the crates piled against the wall. He murmured softly, "You opened it." Then he moved forward and added, "Otto, what the hell is all of this? We need answers. We need to understand what you've been doing." Otto dropped himself onto a chair with the deliberate slowness of a man whose body had been tried by decades of hard work. He folded his hands in his lap and remained silent for a while. Heffinly stated, "It's exactly what it looks like. I have been monitoring those who required my attention," observed. Shane had a strong voice. "This isn't watching, Dad. Stalking is what this is. This is what justice is." Otto abruptly and forcefully cut him off. "When the system malfunctions, this is what occurs. When evil people injure decent people and then go because they are adept at manipulating the system or because no one is concerned enough to hold them responsible." Charlotte's husband softly withdrew his hand when she went for it. "Otto, please explain." Otto then started talking slowly. In 1998, he informed them about the initial case, a family friend whose son died in a fishing mishap brought on by careless equipment upkeep. The boat's owner had lawyers, money, and connections. The inquiry had been hurried, justice had been a harsh letdown, and the family had been crushed. Otto had witnessed the destruction of good people while the guilty individual received little punishment. That day, something inside him had broken. Or maybe something had woken up, a belief that someone had to take action if the system wouldn't. Otto remarked, "I started paying attention to other cases, not just that one. People in the town told me stories of injustices and other wrongdoings. And I became aware of my abilities. I could observe, I could record. I discovered stuff that others had overlooked." He explained how he had taught himself the fundamentals of investigation and how he had discovered how to obtain information covertly. He talked about how satisfying it was to witness one of his cases lead to accountability, an abuser finally facing repercussions, and the exposure of a corrupt company. "But you went too far," he even stated in a tight voice. "You violated the privacy of others. You were given access to private documents. This might land you in jail." Otto looked at his boys. "I completed the necessary tasks. Yes, I did breach boundaries. I'm not going to apologize for that." The room exploded. A number of family members shouted simultaneously, their voices blending with fear, perplexity, and rage. How could he defend this? How was he going to risk everything? The family's television program, the homestead, and their reputation. And what if any of this were made public? However, there was more going on behind the rage. A deep feeling of betrayal. Otto has always been the one who was dependable and stable. He had been their pillar of support. They now knew that he had been leading a double life for decades and harboring secrets that could ruin everything they had created together. "How about us?" Charlotte's calm yet piercing voice broke through the clutter. "How is your family doing? Did you not care enough about us to be honest with us? Did you not believe us?" Otto's jaw tightened, his eyes grew aloof, and for the first time his calm broke. he said horrifyingly. "I was protecting you, all of you. What you didn't know couldn't hurt you, couldn't implicate you. That wasn't your decision to make," said with firmness. Otto shook his head slowly, saying, "We're a family, we face things together. That's what we've always done. This was mine to carry, not this." The unpleasant and circular conversation went on long into the night. Otto admitted the hurt his secrecy had caused, but he would not apologize for what he had done. The family found it difficult to make amends with the man they knew. A devoted parent, an expert mechanic, and a pioneer of the homestead, this shadow version had been secretly monitoring for decades. Nothing had been settled by the time Otto eventually departed, going back to his own cabin as Charlotte watched silently. The family was shattered, the trust had been destroyed, and like the gloomy Alaskan winter they knew was approaching, the dilemma of what to do next hung over them all. The truth comes to light. Following the altercation, the Kilcher family was in a suspended crisis for a few days. They had reluctantly decided to keep the information confidential while they considered their options. However, family privacy is never total, especially when millions of people watch the family's daily activities. Shane decided to look more closely at his father's documents, and what he found made an already tough situation much more complicated. Shane's mother's maiden name was concealed in one of the older journals, a name that chilled his blood. Years after Shane's parents' divorce, in 2001 the entry was made. Otto left cryptic but unsettling notes. Surveillance footage showed Shane's mother and her ex-boyfriend, as well as records of disputes and unsettling conduct. Shane had a private confrontation with his father. "After the divorce, you were observing your mother. Why would you do that?" Quite bluntly, Otto declared him dangerous. "I had some knowledge of him. I had heard rumors. You used to visit her on the weekends when you were a teenager. I had to make sure you were secure. You spied on your former spouse then. I kept my youngsters safe." The disclosure sparked a chain of events. Family members started to realize one by one that Otto surveillance wasn't just for locals and foreigners. There were entries regarding potential romantic possibilities for his children, people who had interacted with the family, business partners the Kilchers had thought about partnering with, and even a television crew member who had been abruptly fired years prior. Otto had been keeping an eye on everyone, screening everyone, and creating a barrier of defense around his family that they were unaware of. Even discovered documents indicating Otto had looked into a number of individuals who had criticized the family online or in public forums. Nothing illegal, but the compulsive record-keeping showed a man who was extremely concerned about the safety and reputation of his family. He even informed his father, "This isn't protection," during yet another heated exchange. Otto, however, had a different perspective. "This is control, this is paranoia." He saw himself as the guardian that everyone needed but no one had asked for. There were plenty of people in the world who would take advantage of you, harm innocent people, and smirk while plotting your demise. He had seen enough and lived long enough to understand that the Kilt could not afford the luxury of trust. The family had a private consultation with a lawyer who was not part of their social circle and could offer unbiased counsel. It was not good news. Otto may face several criminal charges, stalking, and harassment as a result of his acts, including spying, obtaining private documents, and anonymous tips that resulted in legal actions against his targets. It might even be theft or computer crimes, depending on how he got specific data. His targets might file a civil lawsuit if they found out what he had done. The repercussions could be dire if law enforcement got involved. Additionally, if the news were picked up by the media, it would be a scandal that would ruin the family's reputation and television career. The family was forced to make a decision: defend Otto and run the chance of joining him in his deeds, or reveal the truth and suffer the repercussions together. Atz advocated for confronting the issue head-on. "Our reputation has been established by being honest and exposing the true difficulties of life." Others disagreed, "But we can't disguise this. It was more than just a show. It was their source of income. It supported several family branches financially, hired crew members, and had grown to be an important aspect of their identity. All of that may end if Otto's actions were made public. Charlotte attempted to manage the conflict between her husband's wrongdoing and her loyalty to him. She said there might be a compromise. The evidence is destroyed. Otto is stopped by us. We proceed. Shane, however, shook his head. We are therefore accessories. We are equally guilty as a result. When August, the young man who had initially found the root vendor, spoke up, the tension reached a breaking point. Despite his youth, his voice was steady. We instill in our children the values of ethics and accountability. If we hide this, how can we accomplish that? What does that reveal about our true selves? His comments lingered in the atmosphere, unanswerable. During these family arguments, Otto, for his part, said very little. He had made his peace. He had been living his truth for about 30 years. Perhaps, as some family members suspected, he was relieved that he had no control over what transpired next. Year after year, the weight of his secrets had been gradually crushing him. The family realized they were running out of time, but they were still stuck at an impasse. August had reported to a close friend that he had discovered something strange at his grandfather's house. Curiosity or rumor would eventually grow into something more harmful. It is nearly impossible to conceal the truth once it has been revealed. Uncertainty and aftermath. It had been 3 weeks since August. The contents of Otto's locked root cellar were found by Kilcher. The Kilcher family is still in distress as of 2405. Their well-known unity was put to the test in unexpected ways. Otto has taken down the root selling business. The family has not yet determined what to do with the containers, but they have been moved to a storage facility off the homestead. The writings and photos are still in limbo because they are too crucial as possible evidence to trash and too risky to maintain. Otto has becoming increasingly solitary. He continues to work on the homestead, maintain his equipment, and take care of his everyday obligations. However, he is now separated from the others. A wall of unsolved questions and shattered trust. Charlotte told her stepdaughter that Otto appeared almost relieved, as though a burden had been lifted off his shoulders by the revelation of his secret. However, he expresses regret only for the suffering his family had as a result of his secrecy, not regret for his acts. For the time being, the family has chosen to keep the situation confidential. The judgment has a significant impact on all of them, especially those who feel that responsibility and transparency are unavoidable principles. They have conferred with attorneys and have been advised that total quiet is their safest legal course of action. The Last Frontier, the upcoming season of Alaska, will start production in 6 weeks. Otto's participation has not yet been decided by the family. They are currently assessing the risks associated with his on-screen presence. If the truth ever comes to light, the show that made them famous might end up being the catalyst for their demise. The family's relationships have been tense. Some members have taken Otto's side, claiming that his goals were one of justice and protection, even if his tactics were flawed. Others feel that by endorsing him, they are implicated in his transgression of basic moral principles. August, whose inquisitiveness set off this whole situation, has become more reclusive. He believes he is to blame for upsetting his family's harmony. The innocence of merely exploring his family's farm has given way to the complex reality of adult secrets and moral uncertainty, despite the adults' best efforts to reassure him that he did nothing wrong. They are all plagued by the larger question: Otto Kilcher, who is he? Did he take matters into his own hands as a vigilante? A paranoid man whose experiences and trauma clouded his judgment, a guardian father whose affection for his family turned into something more sinister. Or maybe he is all of these things, a complicated, imperfect person whose deeds are difficult to classify as right or bad. The root cellar is now just another abandoned building on the expansive estate, with its door completely removed. However, it is difficult to deconstruct what it stood for: the secrets, the surveillance, and the shadowy existence Otto led. The Kilchers have endured severe winters, financial difficulties, personal tragedies, and the rigorous scrutiny of public life. However, this crisis is distinct. This goes straight to the core of their self-perception. The family is facing their biggest obstacle to yet as the long Alaskan winter draws near, re-establishing trust, balancing their ideals with realities, and determining if some secrets can ever be fully forgiven after they are revealed. Although the locked root cellar has been unlocked, there may never be a complete answer to the issues it raises. The Kilcher family's narrative is far from finished, and everything they believe to be true about their homestead existence continues to change in light of Otto's covert actions. What should Otto do next, in your opinion? Was he going too far, or was he just defending his family? Don't forget to subscribe for updates on this evolving topic and leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Press the alert button to ensure you never miss the most recent information about the Kilchers and the secrets that revolutionize the world.